I sent a letter or an email to one of the councillors at Bolsover District Council. It might have been Steve Fritchley. And I'd read something on I think it was on Bolsover TV, thinking about what happened in World War II. So I'd got this story about how my father was in a reserved occupation as working as a fitter at Cresswell Colliery on the surface. How did he end up in the war? So at some point in my life I'd asked my mother why he was there, and apparently he was sent for by the colliery manager, the story goes, and my dad went, what's the matter? I've done nothing wrong, why am I here? He says, you're here, Ralph, because you're going down the pit on Monday. He says, I'm not. He says, yes, you are. My son's taking your job. He says, well, how old is he? He says, old enough. Why? Because he's been called up and I ain't having him fighting. So you're going in his place. If you don't go down there on Monday morning, you're out of a job. A few months later, he's called up in April 1940 and down to Aldershot Barracks for training. And then obviously he went into the war, went to Egypt and fought all across North Africa. He was injured a few times and more seriously at El Alamein, such as they sent him home. And that's he only ever saw me twice, and that's one, and obviously I was too young then to know because it was in 1942. But the one recollection I have got is after they'd come back home, after fighting in Africa, Sicily, Italy, they were sent home to train in Sherwood Forest, ready for this Operation Market Garden. And there was a knock on the front door. My mum went and opened the door, and my dad stood there in his uniform, surprised her, and he come in, and I can see it now. He picked me up and gave me a big squeeze like this and a few kisses, and said whatever he said I can't remember, but he said a few things, and then he spoke, and my mum had a few words, and he said, I'm sorry, I can't stop. We're on our way down south. So he carried me outside the front door, looked down Queen Street in Cresswell, with church is right across there, and at the bottom of the street is a tank. So he's holding me, then he passed me back to my mum. He marched down the street, onto the tracks, onto there, into the turret, and that was it. That's the only memory I've got of my father. That's my only time that I actually physically know I met him. 2 years, nearly 2.5 years old. As if I'm talking to you now. I can still see him, his burial and, uniform. And he went over to France 2 days after, and then they fought their way from France all the way through into Belgium and then into Holland. And then he met his fate, and that was it. But apparently, afterwards, when people in Cresswell found out what had happened to him, and they found out how he'd got into the war, because some of them obviously knew from the start, that colliery manager and his family were ostracised. Nobody spoke to them, and eventually they had to leave village because they wouldn't get served in the shops, they wouldn't get anything. The day that my dad and Baz Nichols, his co-driver, were killed, it was on a farm, and these 2 German tanks were hiding in an orchard. Up in the loft, there's 2 German soldiers with a radio, and they're looking straight down the Europlan. And this is from Danny. He says, as we approached Nuenen, we came under fire from machine guns. And the 101st Airborne, band of brothers, they were actually riding on all the tanks. There were 16 tanks, and they were hitching a ride, basically. So they all scattered. And he says, I don't know how. He says, but your dad put the tank into reverse and parked it between two houses so they couldn't be seen. Anyway, Benton radioed headquarters in Eindhoven and said, can we have a plane up? There's something here that we're not seeing. And he was told, no, it's urgent, you've got to get to Arnhem. So he says, we pulled out, went a bit further, machine guns again. Again, he reversed and parked between two different houses. Again, he asked for help. No, he can't have it. So off they went again. And then there's a priest running up the road in front of them doing this. And they couldn't understand him. You know, Benton's talking to him, what is it? And he's pointing to the farm. And he said, look, on the radio, there's something here. We're being warned. And we've now got a priest telling us. And apparently it got a bit nasty. You've got your orders, get on with it. So he says, we continued. These two Germans in the loft, looking down the road, are talking on their radio to tank commanders in these hidden tanks. And he's counting down 100 metres, 90 metres, 80 metres, 75 metres, fire! First shell, straight through tank. Baz Nichols, co-driver, it killed him, put it that way. And it went injured my dad. We thought it had killed him outright at that point, and that's what my mum always believed, but I've found out since that it wasn't. The three above, Danny and other two, Benton and other lad, I don't know his name, they dove out the tank and rolled down a bank. A second shell hit the tank, took the turret off, and it rolled into a field. That, as far as Danny knew, was going to tell us, was how it happened. Couple of years ago, I'm roaming on YouTube and I find this Battle of Nuenen, 1944. So I clicked on and watched it, and it's a good description of what happened. And it says this tank was hit, first shell, the three men jumped out, and it says, followed by a fourth. Unfortunately, the fourth soldier had lost his legs, and that was my father. And it's obviously died from blood loss and shock, obviously, you know. But I'd always had this thing in my mind that he burnt to death. That's what worried me. I'd got this horrible feeling of seeing my dad stuck in the tank and he can't get out, you know. But yeah, it was bad in the way that he died, but he wasn't burnt, and that made me feel a bit better, you know. And this farmer Vink, he got his lads, Dirk, who was aged 10, and some more lads, and they dug two graves at the side of the road under the farmhouse wall. And after the war was over, he had a stone plaque made, and on it, in Dutch, they gave their lives for our freedom. And then there's a tank cut into the stone, and my dad's name and Baz Nichols' name below. And he had that put in his farmhouse wall. He took bricks out the farmhouse and he stuck this in the wall. And every September 20th or thereabouts, from that day on, they held a parade and they laid flowers where the graves had been. When I found out that the Germans had killed him, like a lot of other people, it made me think not too kindly of the Germans. But as I got older, I sat and thought, oh, hold on a minute. He went from all the way through Africa, up Sicily, up Italy. How many children, fathers, did they kill? You know, and that's settled my mind, because obviously I realised then that, yeah, they must have killed a lot of people in those tanks. And it sort of settled my mind a bit. It made me feel not a lot better, but more understandable as to what war was about. So we got asked if we would like to go over. And we talked about it with family, with 3 kids, and asked them if they would like to go. And they said, well, yeah, it's something, it's our history, we've got to see what it is. So we had this ceremony in church, and
where all the school children walked to the front, were given a candle, and the candle,
tea light,
like a tea light, was for everybody that had got killed in the Battle of Nuenen, including the Dutch civilians and the Dutch soldiers as well. So there was by the time they'd finished, there was all in front of the altar was just a mass of tea lights, which was lovely. It was.
And from then we went outside, and that's when we walked. Well, I didn't, because I've now got a mobility scooter, and we walked down to where the monument is, down Park Street, and that's when we had the ceremony and flowers and wreaths and everything. They have this parade every year, and the children and boys and girls in the scouts and school children, they all march with the parents, walk from the park down to where the monument is. And the monument is actually directly opposite where the farmhouse was. And that's where my dad was buried, across that road in that corner. As you can imagine, there's hundreds of people around this monument, and the mayor, she's talked to everybody. The lady who's organised it, Annika, she read out, different things. We'd got American soldiers representing 101st Airborne. We had a deputy chief from Amsterdam, American embassy, and another general, and then we got a Dutch general there as well, and they welcomed all those. And then Mayor turned to me and said, you don't know what this is and what it's about, but can you join me, please? So I got up and walked up to her, and somebody handed her this blue box, and she went on to tell me, we're so grateful for what your father did to get the Germans out of our village. We've had 80 years of freedom from that date, and I'd like to give you this. And then she gave me this blue box, and I said, there's a stainless steel shield in there dedicated to my father and the date of his death. And I welled up. I couldn't help it. I just basically tried to say thank you and whatever, but I went and sat down and gave it to Jackie, and I just sat there and trying not to really cry, but I'm holding it back, and it went great. The children realised the significance of it, and it filled a gap. They'd heard us talk about this in the way I'm talking now, but not in as much detail because we didn't want to upset them. But they now know where their great-granddad died, and they know where he's buried. It's something that they'll never forget.
I mean, in our lifetime, we'll never go again. We're hopeful that the children and the grandchildren will go, which I think they will. But we've decided we don't want to fly anymore. It's too traumatic. No. But it was nice for us, for the final time, to be with all the family. It was lovely, wasn't it? It really was. It was lovely.
Yeah. I can talk about it better now than I probably could have early in my life when I was a child and knew that my dad my mother said they'd been ambushed, which effectively they had, but that's as much as she knew. And I've ticked one of my bucket list by having my grandchildren go with us to see where my father, their great-granddad, was killed and where he's buried.